Welcome back, everybody. I hope everybody had a great day. I hope you have had a great Holy Thursday, and I pray for everybody who watches this to have a fruitful Good Friday and also to have a blessed Triduum. We're going to be continuing our discussion of immigration and the immigration policy of the Trump administration. And I saw the feedback on wanting more analysis, so we're going to do that. We will be doing a fair amount of reading just because I've got some sourcing from the Summa that will be relevant to this discussion. I also want to say we're going to focus pretty heavily on some tweets from Dr. Edward Feser. I respect Dr. Feser a lot. I think he's a genius. I met him in person once. He was lovely. So I have nothing but respect for him. And he was kind in person. I just disagree with him on this issue. And so I'm just going to talk about why I disagree and where I think he was wrong in his analysis of immigration policy and due process and the rule of law. So if you didn't see, recently, J.D. Vance tweeted something very long. It's a couple paragraphs long, proposing basically the idea that if we were to follow the due process that the left is asking for every single illegal, we would not be able to deport the number of illegals we need to deport in the next 4 years. And of course, 4 years is the relevant time frame here because the next election is not guaranteed as much as we would like it to be. It's not. So a quick quote from this that I think summarizes most of what he said pretty well is, here's a useful task. Ask people weeping over the lack of due process what precisely they propose for dealing with Biden's millions and millions of illegals, and with reasonable resource and administrative judge constraints, does their solution allow us to deport at least a few million people per year? If the answer is no, they've given their game away. They don't want border security. They don't want us to deport the people who've come into our country illegally. They want to accomplish through fake legal process what they failed to accomplish politically, the ratification of Biden's illegal migrant invasion. And just to be clear, and I'm just making this abundantly clear so that nobody thinks that I'm personally or attacking Dr. Feser or there's any question of ad hominem. I don't think Dr. Feser is, weeping or, I don't think that these specific rhetorical exaggerations apply to Dr. Feser. This is just something JD said about the left in general. Dr. Feser quote tweeted JD Vance's tweet saying, quote, yes, Biden's policy was disastrous and Trump is right to vigorously reverse it. But the rule of law and due process are even more fundamental to justice and to the common good than immigration policy. To flout them in the name of a good cause will only hurt the cause. And while the vice president is right to say that not all due process concerns are equally urgent, they are obviously urgent when a man has been deported and sent to a prison like CCOT. Finally, yes, many progressives are arguing in bad faith, but that is irrelevant. I share the vice president's commitment to natural law and Catholic moral principles, and we must adhere rigidly to those principles whether or not our opponents do the same, and whether or not doing so serves our partisan interests. The first thing I want to say is, and in thinking about making this video specifically addressing Dr. Feser's points about this, I did run it by 3 of my friends who I think of as smarter than me and who I would say probably know me very well. And I asked them about this tweet specifically because my read of it was that it sounded like Dr. Feser was referring to the immigration crisis as a partisan interest. And they agreed with my take on that. So I would just say to Dr. Feser, if he ever sees any of this, that I strongly disagree with you that the migration crisis in the United States is a quote unquote partisan interest. If it is a partisan interest, it's a partisan interest because the Democrats are trying to import millions of voters so that they never lose an election again, which makes this also an abortion issue and a pro-life issue. As evidence of that, Pew Research has done surveys which found that of first-generation Hispanic immigrants, 63% of them vote or lean Democrat, and second-generation Hispanics, 71% vote or lean Democrat. And so while I I don't think partisan interest is a great way to phrase this. I think I do agree with both the Vice President and with Dr. Feser. I think this is a common good question. And I think the common good in question is the common good of the future of our country if we allow for massive demographic replacement and change that will result in voter change and partisan change, which will effectively result in one-party rule. Feser tweeted another tweet, which was not in response to anything, but is on the same topic. So I will read some of it here. It's 3 paragraphs long. He said, quote, "Some argue that after years of lawlessness on the part of the Biden administration and some other Democrat officials, the Trump administration needs discretionary leeway to set things right and shouldn't be expected to fuss over legal niceties. There are 2 problems with this argument. First, the problem with the way the Democrats have acted, failure to enforce laws, resort to lawfare, etc., is not just that it has been to the detriment of those on the right. It is more importantly that it's been to the detriment of the country. What is needed for the common good is not retaliatory deviations from the rule of law, which simply accelerate rather than reverse our spiral into lawlessness, but on the contrary, more rigid adherence to the rule of law. The right needs to hold itself to a higher standard than the left has, not to look for rationalizations for doing as they have done. Second, even when discretionary power is necessary, it should only be put in the hands of a leader of utmost probity who will use it sparingly and dispassionately for the common good rather than for self-aggrandizement and score settling. The situation we are in is the opposite of that." Once again, Dr. Feser, if you think that 30 million illegals in this country is an issue of Trump's self-aggrandizing and score settling, I fundamentally disagree, and I think that most Americans who voted for him disagree. We see it as an issue of the future of our country and of our right to the land which we legally and have a right to, which they do not. This is not score settling on behalf of Trump or self-aggrandizement on behalf of Trump. This is about justice. This is about justice for the people who live here, whose families have lived here for generations, who have a right to be here. I want to read here a section from the Summa. We'll read 2 sections from the Summa here. The first is we're gonna go kind of in a reverse order here, but just follow me here. The first quotation from the Summa I want to read is the first part of the second part, question 96, Article 6. In the respondio, it says, Now it happens often that the observance of some point of law conduces to the common weal in the majority of instances, and yet in some cases it is very hurtful. Since then the lawgiver cannot have in view every single case, he shapes the law according to what happens most frequently by directing his attention to the common good. Wherefore, if a case arise wherein the observance of the law would be hurtful to the general welfare, it should not be observed. This is the case currently. If we were to observe the due process laws, which are currently on the books for every single illegal in this country, we would not be able to deport them in time. This is J.D. Vance's larger point. And to Dr. Feser's argument that we must adhere more rigidly to the principles of natural law and Catholic moral principles, I think rigid adherence to these principles, as laid out in the Summa, would actually be something along the lines of waiving these due process rights to achieve justice, to achieve the right end. Because the law currently in this country is not a method by which good and the common good is achieved. It's a method by which the common good is held up. Dr. Feser himself, I would hope would agree with this, because he says that the rule of law and due process are fundamental to the common good, meaning that he understands the common good as the highest principle, which means that if the rule of law and due process are, in fact, hindrances on the common good, then the common good is the higher principle. And there's no absolute right to due process for non-citizens. There's no moral divine law which says that non-citizens of a state are obliged to receive due process in a legal system. Thomas continues once again, this is the first part of the second part, question 96, Article 6. Thomas continues, he says, "Nevertheless, it must be noted that the observance of the law according to the letter does not involve any sudden risk needing instant remedy. It is not competent for everyone to expound on what is useful to the state. Those alone who can do this are in authority, and who, on account of such like cases, have power to dispense the laws. If, however, the peril be so sudden as to not allow the delay involved by referring the matter to authority, the mere necessity brings with it a dispensation, since necessity knows no law. Now, I think this last phrase, necessity knows no law, clearly applies here. As I said at the start, the next presidential election is not guaranteed. We have 4 years to do this. And if we lose in 4 years, they will bring in more for the express purpose of holding up the courts and making this situation worse. We have a necessity here. The peril is so sudden as to not allow delay. 4 years might sound like a long time, but it is a situational analysis. And the situation here is that there is no time to delay. Necessity knows no law. The law does not apply to these things. It ought not. Further, those alone who can do this are in authority, and who on account of such like cases have the power to dispense the laws. I mean this with all respect, but Dr. Feser, you're not in authority of the state, and President Trump, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Kristi Noem are. They have the authority to dispense the law. They especially have the authority to dispense the law if in their authority they see it as being for the common good. To say that necessarily because you personally, your personal perception is that the people in power are seeking self-aggrandizement, to say that because your personal perception of that is self-aggrandizement and score settling, they don't have the authority they do, is to itself ignore the rule of law you seem to be concerned with. The rule of law states that these are the people in authority. Thomas says that the people in authority have the power to dispense from the laws. If the people in authority see it as being for the common good to dispense of these laws, they have the right to do so, especially if there is a peril that is so sudden it would not allow delay. I keep saying it, but I do respect Dr. Feser. I think I genuinely did enjoy meeting him in person. I think he's a genius, but I just think he's wrong about this. It says what it says. This is not especially opaque. It's pretty clear that if the common good is held up by the letter of the law, then the letter of the law should be dispensed. It doesn't say can be. It doesn't say can be, right? It says should not be. It doesn't say that they can. It says they should not. Earlier, the two articles earlier, so we're in the same question here. We're in first part of the second part, question 96, article 4. It says, now laws are said to be just, both from end, when to wit they are ordained to the common good, and from their author, that is to say, when the law is made, does not exceed the power of the lawgiver, and from their form, when to wit the burdens are laid on the subjects according to an equality of proportion and with a view to the common good. Okay, so there are 3 components that make a law just. The end, therefore the common good. The author, that the lawgiver has the authority to give the law. And then third, and I think very importantly here, form, when they are laid equally on all subjects. If immigration law in this country is laid in such a way in which the people who have a right to be here are harmed, right? The law is laid more heavily on them because they are harmed and their taxes are used to support these illegals, their jobs are taken, the housing prices are driven up, the cost of goods is driven up, but they do not have a way to get rid of the illegals fast enough, right, in a timely manner, then it's not laid equally, and the law is unjust. So the question of can they dispense with the law is almost secondary, because the law itself is unjust. Further, if we're going to talk about the score settling and the lawfare, which Dr. Feser mentions, it is not the exception in this country that the Democrats and the left get away with things. It is the rule. It is the rule that if you are on the left and you burn a city down, you will not be punished. It is the rule in this country that if you are a Democrat politician or related to one and you do something horrible, like sleeping with a Chinese spy, there will be no consequences. But if you are, for example, like General Michael Flynn was, just an incoming political official, and you meet with a foreign leader, you will be punished for it. It is not the exception. It is the rule that the laws in this country, specifically when they are politically convenient, are ignored for one side. They are not, in their form, just laws, and therefore do not apply. There is no ethereal, abstract rule of law. Laws are given by men, and they are just or they are unjust. And if they are not laid equally, then they are unjust. If they are laid equally but then enforced as a rule unequally, then they are in practice unjust. There is nothing wrong with what the Trump administration is doing. If anything, the Trump administration's mistake here is being too following the letter of the law too much, because it is hindering what they're able to do. If anything, a rigid adherence to Catholic moral law principles would be for J.D. Vance to go on Twitter and to say, the court is out of line here. The court is stepping over. The court is acting contrary to the common good. Therefore, we will ignore them. That would be a rigid adherence to Catholic moral principles. Real quick, if you want to support my work and see more of it, make sure to click subscribe, click like, leave a comment with your feedback, thoughts. And also, if you really want to support me, go to alppouch.com/Josiah. That's alppouch.com/JOSIAH. You'll get 10% off your first order. And I get a little part of all of those orders. That really supports me, helps me to be able to do more stuff like this. Thank you. Dr. Feser also tweeted a quote from Centesimus Annus. He tweeted Centesimus Annus paragraph 44, which reads, quote, "The organization of society according to three powers, legislative, executive, and judicial, reflects a realistic vision of man's social nature, which calls for legislation capable of protecting the freedom of all. To that end, it is preferable that each power be balanced by others and by other spheres of responsibility which keep it within its proper bounds. This principle is called the rule of law, in which the law is sovereign and not the arbitrary will of individuals." I'll return once more to this point, but the immigration crisis and the mass deportations is not the arbitrary will of any individual. It is the will of the people. This is what the Trump administration was elected to do. Also, I will say that in this quotation that Dr. Feser himself tweeted, it says that the powers need to be balanced by other spheres of responsibility which keep it within its proper bounds. In the 9-0 Supreme Court decision, which is all up in arms and people are arguing about who was sided with who, it says explicitly that the district court likely overstepped when it said that the Trump administration had to, quote, effectuate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The courts are the ones who are overstepping their proper bounds, not the Trump administration. I want to read 2 paragraphs later, Centesimus Annus 46. Dr. Feser didn't tweet this, but I went back and reviewed Centesimus to make this. It says, quote, "The church values the democratic system insomuch as it ensures the participation of the citizens in making political choices, guarantees to the governed the possibility of both electing and holding accountable those who govern them, and of replacing them through peaceful means when appropriate. Thus, she cannot encourage the formation of narrow ruling groups which usurp the power of the state for individual interests or for ideological ends. The Democrats immigration policy is explicitly for ideological ends, to replace the native population of this country and import a new power base for them. They've admitted as much on multiple occasions. The start of this quote, also, the church values the democratic system insomuch as it ensures the participation of citizens in making political choices, guarantees to the governed the possibility of both electing and holding accountable those who govern them. If the immigration laws in this country are such that it is not possible to hold to account the Democratic Party and the former Biden administration for what they did to this country with their illegal immigration plans, then the democratic system is not functioning in the way that the church supports it. The church supports the democratic system insofar as it allows us, the people, to hold to account our leaders. If we cannot hold to account our leaders, then the democratic system in this country is not one which is of the nature that the church supports, and thus should be ignored. And not just by the people, but by those in authority, as Thomas says, which is not me, it's not you watching this, it's not Dr. Feser, it's the people in authority who are President Trump, Vice President Vance, Secretary Noem, Border Czar Tom Homan. These are the people who get to make this decision. These are the people who we elected to hold to account our former leaders for what they did to us. And as a result, they are well within their bounds and have every right to, and also have every duty to do what they are doing right now. And in fact, ought to be doing it harsher. They ought to be doing it faster. They ought to be doing it with more ignoring of the letter of the law, because the letter of the law in this country is unjust. It is wrong. The letter of the law in this country is such that people who have a right to be here, whose families have been here for generations, are treated like garbage and have no recourse to protect their homeland from the illegal invaders who come here. That is not justice. That is not the natural law. That is not Catholic moral principles. I recognize that it comes across like I am angry, and that's because I am. I'm furious. But I'm not angry with Dr. Feser. I'm angry with what's become of this country. I'm angry with what's become of our discourse, when we cannot say honestly as Catholics that we who are built this country, we people who have poured our heart and our soul and raised our families here, do not have a right to it, and that the people who invade it don't have a right to be here, and that they do not have a right to weaponize our own laws against us. That's awful. That's terrible. I'm angry about that. So I want to be clear. I'm angry at this situation. I'm not angry at Dr. Feser, and I don't wish any disrespect to him. I don't intend any disrespect to him. If you do see this, Dr. Feser, I hope you'll sincerely consider what I've put forward here. And I hope you'll also consider that people who disagree with you on this issue may not be necessarily failing in their commitment to Catholic moral principles because they wish to have their country be their country and not the country of the invaders who have no right to be here. God bless you all. Have a holy triduum and revolt into sanity.